When it comes to money, what's one lesson you wish every young entrepreneur would learn before jumping into real estate?
There's no advice I can give anyone in terms of how to have more money other than to do the thing that sucks. So the hard part is getting in the game. A lot of people like to watch from the sidelines and they're really scared about making the right move, and you don't want to lose your money, and I get that. We all have that feeling. So I really think you just have to get in the game however you can.
What would you guys say is the secret to managing both the business grind and life without having to burn out? Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Straight to the Point. My name's Tristan Guerrero and your host. Today we have a special guest, Krystle Simpson. Krystle, thank you for coming on the show. Appreciate you making some time, dedicating some of the office space here to film the episode. Let's tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your background and how we met.
First of all, thanks for coming to us. I appreciate it. So I am the broker and owner of Pacific Shore Capital. I've been doing commercial and multifamily financing for 22 years.
Wow.
It's like the longer it gets, the crazier it sounds. But yeah, so in the past, we also own apartments ourselves, me and my husband. We formerly owned a property management company that we sold. We managed about 1,000 units at the height of it here in San Diego.
Wow.
We had a podcast. So a lot of things in real estate. Actually originally from San Diego, but I moved to Oklahoma when I was younger. So I grew up on an 80-acre ranch from the time I was 8 until I was 16.
That's nice.
But yeah, so I've pretty much been in real estate since I got out of high school. I did a little bit of college, never really graduated, and just immediately got in real estate. I actually worked for another company for 3 months, and then I met someone who was like, "Why don't you just start your own business?" And so I was terrified, and with $300 in my bank account and no idea how I was going to pay rent, I just left and started my own business. He lent me a couple $1,000s to buy a laptop and a printer, scanner, fax. And I shared a cubby hole, a cubby at a real estate office with the broker of the company. He was never there, so he just let me use part of his space.
Right.
And yeah, 22 years later, here I am.
Wow, that's a very inspiring story. It kind of reminds me where I'm at right now, starting off, but that's awesome to do that. And I know Rich connected us group chat, so I appreciate Rich. Thank you. Shout out to Rich for connecting us too. Let's dive into the podcast. I wanted to first ask you, Krystle, what was the first thing that pulled you into the world of real estate? And how did you know it was the path you wanted to chase?
Well, it's kind of funny because I feel like I've talked to other people and nobody dreams of being in real estate when they're in school. You have these other dreams. I remember when I was younger, I thought I wanted to be a pediatrician. And then I realized you have to go to college forever. And I felt like I should be paid to go to college, not the other way around. I was like, I'm working so hard. Why am I doing this? So I sort of fell into real estate because my mom was actually an account executive at WAMU, if anybody remembers that. She was an account executive, so she worked with mortgage brokers. Those were her clients, and she helped them do loans, essentially. They submitted loans to her. And my mom was doing really well, and she had a pretty flexible schedule with me and my younger brother and sister. I was like, Mom, I need to make money. I was working at T-Mobile selling cell phones. I was like, I'm never going to be able to afford to pay rent in this job. So she referred me to one of her brokers, and that's when I worked for them for 3 months. And honestly, I never really wanted to do residential. That was what I did for that 3 months. I did residential. So go put flyers on people's cars and host first-time home buyer seminars and things like that to try to drum up business. But I never wanted to deal with the emotional aspect of home ownership. Not knowing if you're going to qualify and falling in love with a house and all that kind of stuff. I really liked the business aspect, that it was comes down to the numbers, if it makes sense or not. I'm dealing with more experienced investors who know, they're just business-minded people. So I just did what everybody tells you to do when you get in real estate. I started telling everybody, that's what I want to do, this is what I'm looking for. At the time, I was super into fitness, so I met some people at the gym, of all places, that were like, I'm in real estate, we can help you out. And so that's actually how I got my first loan, is from these people that worked out at the gym that I worked out at. So that's kind of how I fell into it. And my thing with owning real estate was that I start looking at these people's tax returns and I'm underwriting their stuff and I'm seeing the lifestyle they're living. They're always out and about. They're always on vacation. It just seems like they do whatever they want. And so I was like, I need to back into how these people are doing it. It was easy for me because I look into your financial life. I'm like really looking under the hood of your life. Like it's like the most private parts of your life I got to see. And that's how I really started getting into like owning my own apartments and buying real estate and all that.
Wow. That's awesome. I mean, you find a lot of people at random places sometimes, whether it be at the gym or, social gatherings. Maybe your mom knows someone, so falling in love with it from the gym where that's your true love and passion, and then transferring that over to the business, that's great. A great way to start. I like that.
I feel like too, I know this is a little woo-woo, like people might say, oh, you manifested it, whatever. I think it's like when you put something out into the world, that's really what it's all about. It's kind of funny because when you talk about like MLM or some of these other businesses where they want you to go out and like tell family and friends and get them to do things.
Yeah.
I know that it's an icky feeling for a lot of people, but part of it really is like putting your intent out there so that opportunities can come to you. And that's really the way I see it. If you're trying to get into real estate or it's something you want to do, you do need to talk about it. You need to tell people so that you have these opportunities that people don't know if you're looking for an opportunity unless you say it. So
right, you can't be the secret agent.
Yes.
And then have people guess that, oh, are you in real estate?
Right.
Are you not?
It's not going to fall in your lap.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what you got to go with intention, basically.
Yes.
And I noticed also putting out the right energy too, and people see that. Also, people
100%.
get that vibe as well.
Yeah.
I also wanted to go through the podcast and say, going into your business on the mortgage side, I know you funded over $1 billion worth of deals. Now, for someone who's never invested before, what's one move they can make starting building wealth in real estate?
So the way that I got started was when I met my husband, we were just dating at the time, we wanted to invest. And I had invested before passively, like I had some of my clients who were obviously investors, I got to like throw my commission in or things like that. But I never really bought anything by myself or invested in something on my own. So I think the best way to get started for me, and it's really popular, people have been talking about it for years, is like the house hack. That's how we got started. Originally, we wanted to buy like a 2 to 4 unit, live in one of the units, rent out the others. But that, living in San Diego, that was way above what we could even afford at the time. Even with the 3.5% down, like FHA financing, the places that we were looking at, it was like the down payment for that was even too big. So we ended up scaling back. We bought a house and we did the 3.5% down, FHA financing. Nice. It was kind of a funny story too, because we weren't supposed to win the offer. At the time, when we bought our first house, it was like 2012 and the market was on fire. It was when all the flippers were coming back in and they were buying up everything. And I was actually competing with other buyers that had a lot more money down. The seller accidentally faxed the signed counter to my agent instead of sending it to her agent. So we literally got so lucky with this. So we bought the house and our plan was that, if you live in the house for more than 2 years, you can sell it and take the profit up to $500,000 for a married couple. We actually went to the courthouse right before we sold our house to get married, take the money tax free. And we took that profit and rolled it into an apartment building with another partner. Cause we still didn't have enough money. I mean, even with like $500,000, that was not enough to buy even a small apartment building. So we went with partners for our next 2 deals before we actually bought something on our own. So I think you just get in however you can. FHA, 3.5% down, 2 to 4 unit. If not, buy a house, do the 2-year thing. And it really is all about compounding over time. And so that's how we did it.
Yeah.
And that's how I would recommend anybody else get started, because most of us don't inherit money or don't have a lot of money. You just have to do whatever you can do to get in.
Yeah, exactly. And that was kind of my first motive going into trying to own my first property in real estate, is maybe own like a duplex or a fourplex. But even that, I don't really see a lot of those in San Diego at all. And I'm over in North County too. So with the supply so low, where do you even start to get in? And I bet a lot of people watching here that are my age or in that same boat, like, do you go fourplex or twoplex, or do you go more single family, or does it matter which one makes more sense in the situation?
So the hard part is getting in the game. A lot of people like to watch from the sidelines, and they're really scared about making the right move, and you don't want to lose your money, and I get that. We all have that feeling. So I really think you just have to get in the game however you can. Now, that being said, there was a period of time where I would have said absolutely go for the 3 or 4 unit. But because of, like you said, there's so little inventory available, buying a home actually feels almost like a safer option because there's such little inventory and there's no end in sight, at least for San Diego. It really depends on what part of the country you're living in, what neighborhood you're living in. So you really have to kind of figure out where the demand is. So for example, I would say that, if you talk to some agents around San Diego that, 3 and 4 units are not selling as easily right now. So just looking at an inventory perspective, it's like maybe you do buy the house. Maybe then you add the ADU because, we're living in a place where ADUs are all the rage right now. So buy a house that you can add an ADU, do that whole thing, and then have a plan to sell it in the future.
That's a good approach. I know a lot of investors are doing that too. So it could be a possibility to do that.
For sure. And I know that there's been even some question about what's happening with the ADUs. But I do think the idea, like the entire ADU program was originally it was for the people who own a home and wanted to build the granny flat. So I think that that's still going to be something that can be done. And so I think that's a safe way to go into an investment. And it's probably your easiest barrier to entry because, your down payment's going to be less on a house. You're not going to have any cash flow yet, though, until you do the ADU or you want to rent out a room or something. But like I said, it's more about like just get in however you can get in, because once you're actually a player in the game, then you can see things completely differently than just like a spectator who's never done it before.
Right. What do you see as kind of the future for the ADU game? Do you see it being what everyone does in the future in the next 3 to 5 years? Do you think government's going to impose rules where you limit the amount, which has already taken effect in San Diego, where you're maybe only allowed to build 1 to 2 versus up to 10, like some people have been done to take advantage? Like, where do you see that going?
So I'm not an expert on the ADUs, but I will say, the one thing I will say is I think real estate, there's always like a trend in real estate, right? So last cycle, the big thing was condo conversions. And people made a killing on condo conversions. But how many people want to buy a condo that's basically an apartment,
Right.
So with ADUs, I think that they're going to definitely impose some rules. I don't think that's a forever business for someone. I think it's a stepping stone. Like the people that I see that do the best in this market or have done the best in this market, a lot of times are flippers because they have to be really nimble. They're always looking for a deal. If that's your entire business model, and let's say you don't have anything else, you're just a flipper, you're looking for opportunities all the time. So when it was house flipping, that's what it was. When it was the whole like rehab, like, they say lipstick on a pig, sell it, great, they did that. Then it was like, the ADU thing. Now they're doing that. So they're always like opportunists looking for the next opportunity. I think that's something that we can all learn from being in this business and how to continue to be successful is to be able to pivot when needed. So I think the ADU game is really great right now. But again, I was just at an event a couple weeks ago speaking on this. It's like, I don't know how many 200 square foot apartments with no parking we need in San Diego. Like at some point that's going to become an issue,
Right.
And so and that's just logic. That's not me having any sort of background on what the city or the city council's talking about what they're doing. But I will say, as with rent control, the snowball's picking up speed, right? So it's like they plant the seed about the ADU. That's not the end of it. Just because we win this one battle, let's say, it's going to come again. Like they're just laying the foundation to build upon this issue, just like they did with, the rent control in San Diego. It came up again last year. So it's just going to be this continuing thing that's going to keep coming up, and it's going to cause uncertainty in your business if you're a real estate investor. So you have to just always keep your eyes open for when the industry's changing and seeing what risk you're ready for.
Right.
Like I might not be the person that's going to go out and buy a property where I can add 15 ADUs right now.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like before, yes, it's full steam ahead. I'd say get your permits in and like reassess because how much risk are you willing to take?
That too, yeah.
Yeah.
And so you always got to be prepared to expect the unexpected and be prepped because real estate changes every day, like what you were saying.
Yeah, and who screams the loudest? The homeowners that are in those neighborhoods.
Right.
So when has anybody ever cared about the real estate investor? I mean, generally speaking, I would say that like the only people who show up to the city council meetings tend to be the upset residents, right? It's not the investors, because we're busy trying to make money out there. We're not trying to go cause problems and complain.
Yeah.
But the homeowners are the ones who are complaining, and who are their constituents mostly? Their homeowners or their tenants who are upset about their rents or the construction or getting kicked out of their apartment. So that's the majority of their constituents. Those are the people that they're listening to the most. So we just have to be really mindful, like A, get involved if this is 100% your business, and B, just kind of like always assess the risk that you're willing to take, because it's sort of like playing, blackjack or poker sometimes, being in real estate.
You never know what you're going to get.
Yeah, you're always identifying risk. You're like, do I split? Do I split two, fives, or do I, hit it again? It's like, this is the game that we play. Right. I like blackjack, so that's why I use that analogy. But that's like, you are sort of playing a game of poker or blackjack, or however you want to see. You're basically trying to foresee the market. And I don't think ADU is 100% the business. I think it's a great opportunity now. You can make a lot of money, and you've got to be on the lookout for the next opportunity and when things are shifting and changing.
Right. Well, moving on from the ADU topic, I wanted to also cover, like, a lot of people going into social media scroll past content about investing or possibly starting a business because it feels too far off from them. So how could someone with no experience starting as an investor do at the beginning?
That's a really good question. I think there's a lot of different ways to go about it, just depending on your personality type. For me, the best way has been to get in the business. As an example, if you were to start like selling real estate or go to work for a larger real estate team where you get sort of exposure to negotiations, real estate language, getting to know the market, like there is no better way to get to know a market that you want to invest in the future than to work in it. When we owned the property management company, I could have told you like down to the block, like what market rents were at that any given time, what the expenses were at any given time. The same thing if you go to work, let's say even for like a realtor, like a top realtor, you go on like a team, you're going to get to drive all these different properties in these different neighborhoods. You're going to see the comps. You're going to hear all the language. You're going to hear their theories about these things, like people who are way more experienced than you. So I feel like going to work for a team in real estate, whether it's however you can get in. And I know that like income's always a factor, but if you can go work for a large real estate team, you can go work in a property management office, any type of real estate that you can get exposure to is going to help you get more comfortable, and you're going to start thinking of ideas on how you can get into the market. Totally.
Now, would that apply for people possibly going into investing? They get that experience?
For sure.
Too? Okay.
Yeah, so you could even go work, like let's say you can go and work for like one of those syndication firms or an investment firm as an analyst, where you're analyzing. Like there's so many different types of jobs and careers in real estate that you could get access to. Like even for me, for example, I started in residential. I knew I didn't really want to be there, but I just took whatever I could get at the time.
Right.
And so that's what I did. Some people want to invest, so they go become an analyst for like an investment firm, or they hammer the phones, like hardest job ever, but like that's definitely an education in itself. However you can get a job in real estate, and also like kind of what speaks to you. And it's like maybe all you can get is a job in property management, an entry-level job, and it like checks the box because you know hourly how much you're going to make or whatever.
Yeah.
You just kind of have to get in and be willing to try things. It's not forever. You can always change your mind. Yeah. You can always shift.
Right. It's just a stepping stone job. And that's how I looked at it, starting. I used to work at a running shoe store because I'm a big runner too, just like Kenny was every morning. Cool. And I knew it's a stepping stone job, and my boss back then told me, look, I understand this is a stepping stone job, so I'm going to teach you as much as I can so you can move on to the next chapter of your life, wherever you want to go, right?
For sure.
You and Kenny do co-host a podcast, I saw, and run a business and also invest together, which is a lot going on, and raising
togetherness.
A family. Right. So what would you guys say is the secret to managing both the business grind and life without having to burn out?
Yeah, and the answer changes like with every phase of life. So I've been working with Kenny since we first met. When we first met, we were actually introduced through my mom. We worked together. Yeah, I always tease. It was like an arranged marriage, but like a willing one. We liked each other. It was like 2009. I had just moved back from the Bay Area. I'd lived there for a few years, and he was kind of down and out. He had like a partner that wasn't very good, and I was kind of like, I had just left Washington Mutual, and I was like, what am I going to do? And so we started our business back in the living room and the dining room of this 1-bedroom apartment he had in Encinitas, and just started calling everybody we knew. Same thing again, just call everybody, hey, I'm here, remember me? And, so he left his partner, and I was like, let's do this, And so we've been working together since day one, I guess is where I'm getting. And we've had a lot of therapy over the years too. In the beginning, like we went to a couples counseling. He was in a men's group, and that was kind of like for family stuff. But I say that because it's like a really good foundation to how we communicate. Like I always say, like we're good at fighting, like we're good at arguing. Like we don't get into these arguments where you're going in circles, and it's like, things like that. So I think what we've learned over the years is that I handle 100% of my role. He handles 100% of his role. We don't criticize each other.
Right.
Like we've learned that you don't do that. We still struggle to turn it off at night. I mean, believe me, my mom works here in the office too. She's his processor. Wow. So when grandma comes over to see the grandkids, it's so annoying sometimes. It's like, okay, do we have to talk about this file that you guys are dealing with at, 6:30 at night when you're here?
Put it to rest.
Oh, gosh, so there's stuff like that. But we overall love working together. And I think it really comes down to like letting your spouse or significant other own their role, because the problem comes when you think you do it better than me. And now you're sort of like telling me what to do, rather than just kind of having fun with it, waiting for the right moment to say it in a way that's not so offensive or like putting people on the defense. Yeah. So I think just over time you learn those little things, because I hear that a lot too. People are like, oh my God, how could you work? Like I would kill my husband. I would kill my wife. Like it would just be like terrible.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it probably would be, because that's the way you're approaching it. But two people have to approach it like they want this to work, and then you figure it out.
That's funny. I think having that life partner is the most important part. And I actually see a lot more businesses thrive when couples run a company, from my perspective.
Personally.
And being able to be introduced to both you and Kenny was honestly, it was kind of cool to see, and being able to research you guys beforehand to see like, oh wow, this is a pretty established couple that's built almost an empire for themselves. And how, like from the beginning, how did you know, like, from day one meeting Kenny, you wanted to start this business with him and then move into being that life partner?
So it might sound strange to some people, but that was always what I wanted, like my whole life. But that's probably because my mom and dad owned a business when I was younger together, and I had to work in that business since I was 12. So my friends would go hang out after school, and I had to go to work. And on the weekends, I would have to dispatch plumbers all day, like on Saturdays. So, which I hated at the time. I thought it was like the worst, but it really taught me a lot about business. But I also just like didn't know anything else. My mom and my stepdad worked together my entire life growing up. That's just what I knew. So it's what I always wanted. And I think it's what Kenny always wanted, even though he wasn't really exposed to that. And so we just kind of like, that was like always our dream, And to your point, I personally think it's the best. I mean, I can't imagine, I could not imagine going to work, Kenny goes to work, and then we come home and it's like, how was your day? And, this like really, like that feels really separate to me. And, and it's kind of funny though too, because if you see us in the office, it's not like we're talking all day. It's not like we're like holding hands, like replying to emails, you know? I mean, we're doing our own kind of business. There are days when I don't talk to him because we're just so busy. I don't even always talk to my mom when she's in here. So it's not like this big kumbaya. We're busy. We're all doing things, but we're like it's a collective effort.
Right.
Which, like you said, it's great because you're building this thing together.
Yeah, I like that. That's cool. And I want to have that too. That's why I'm like
Yeah.
going into that. Just going along with the podcast here. When it comes to money, what's one lesson you wish every young entrepreneur would learn before jumping into real estate?
I would say the thing that comes to mind is,
or maybe like top 3 things.
Well, so it's kind of interesting because I feel like things have changed, right? So much with social media. And I think there's a lot of temptation out there to have all these things, right? And if it's not to have all these things, it's to like go out to the cool restaurant or go out to the new place. Right. And so it's really not sexy. Like there's no advice I can give anyone in terms of how to have more money other than to do the thing that sucks, which is like be really frugal. And when your friends are going out, you're like, sorry, I can't do that tonight. You know, I mean, just to really avoid doing a lot of those things. I've heard, people say it's like pay the price now so you can pay any price later. And that's really the way we sort of saved money. I mean, before we had kids, kids change a lot of things. So for me, I always, people always want to say, do it later. I'll do it later. Maybe next year I'll start saving, or, after I buy these things, then I'll be good. And then I won't, need anything else. Well, there's always something else. And the easiest time to do it is when you're single or before you have kids. Because once you have kids, then you need to pay for conveniences on top of having kids, which are expensive. So it's like, my advice to younger people is to do it now instead of putting it off, because it only gets harder the older you get or the more of a life you build. The younger you are, the better off you are to save. And, I know it sucks living at home, but sometimes that's what you need to do to save money. And I know it sucks to not go out with your friends. You go to the new cool restaurant and go to the new cool club or whatever the things are that people are doing. Right. Or having the name brand things, which you'll learn later in life you don't care about. So it's like those things, if you save now, you can afford to do all those things if you want to later. But it only gets harder. I have so many friends who have kids now who see us investing and they go, man, I wish I could do that, but I just can't. And it's like, well, you could. You'd have to sacrifice a lot with your kids, but I promise you sacrificing when you're younger and single and with no kids is so much easier than when you've got a full life and a family to take care of.
Right. Wow. I'm still trying to learn that right now, and it's been very difficult, moving your whole life to a whole different area. I mean, you must know doing that to the Bay Area is it's not easy, and I'm learning that 6 months in, still trying to find my footing. And
it takes time too.
Yeah.
I actually think it takes years when you decide that you're going to live somewhere else and you start a new life. It takes time to get ingrained into your community. And then it also is like we were saying, you want to meet people. So you're like, hey, so now I'm supposed to stay home and not do anything, but I just moved to this place. I got to meet people. So, I mean, there is an adjustment period. It's, you just have to decide the balance that you want to have. But I think, I applaud you for moving, because I think it's hard for people to do. But if you know it's right for you, it just takes a couple of years to get.
Yeah, right. What would you say was the first thing you did in the first year moving into San Francisco, a place that was foreign to you?
So the easiest thing in terms of meeting people was just people I worked with. Trying to just go out with those people and make connections there, which actually was not as easy as I thought. I'm going to be really honest. I had my business here in San Diego, and I was in this relationship that was just really toxic. I was dating this guy. And so I literally left my business and took a job up in the Bay Area to get away from this, because I'm like, this is just becoming really bad. I had a very successful business here, but I was like, I need to get out of here. I think that's the only thing I can do.
Right.
So I imagined going into corporate life, working at a bank. It's such a joke, because I was like, we're going to be high-fiving and going to happy hour all the time, and it's going to be so fun. And that was not what it was. You had to I had to actually make a lot of effort, to make friends, to have a life. And even then, I think there is a loneliness that you feel unless you're a really outgoing person who's going to ask for people's numbers and actually call and reach out when you get it. I think I've had friends that have moved to new cities that had a much easier time than me. I'm a little bit more shy about those things. I'm like the person who gets your number and like hopes you're going to call instead of me calling,
Oh.
So just funny because I'm in sales and I'll call for clients, but in my personal life, I'm just a little bit more shy. Like, what do I ask them? What do I do? So I think moving to a new city is really just like wherever you work, I would maximize those opportunities because even if those people are not meant to be your like close friends, they have friends and other people that just get you out and about meeting other people. Really all you're trying to do is get yourself around as much opportunity as possible. So the more like when you first start, you just like business. Okay, when I first started my business, every person who called me for any kind of financing, I said yes to. And it could have been the biggest nightmare client, the person that was like, filed bankruptcy and there was like no chance they were ever getting a loan. I would say yes, and I would try to work that thing to just try to make it happen. But then as you get more experience in business, you learn that you need to say no so that you can use your time better. The same thing happens when you move to a new place. You just say yes to everything. You put yourself out there. You go everywhere because you're looking for opportunities. Then you start saying no when your life starts feeling full and you have some people that you like hanging out with or you have clients that you've built up. It's the same thing.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. That's good to know. I mean, starting off, you kind of have to say yes to everything to get your footing. So
and it's all experience, right?
Yeah.
It teaches you. So you're like, I don't need to learn that lesson 12 times. I learned a few times.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Move on.
You have your go-to people to lean back on.
Yeah,
totally. Well, as we're wrapping up the episode here, I did want to ask one last question for you, Krystle. If you had to go back in time and if you were 22, 23 again, starting from scratch, but knowing what you know now, what would you do in your first year to build a solid foundation for yourself?
What I would have done in my first year is I would have gone and worked under a large team. I went out on my own, like from the very beginning. Even when I worked for that company the first 3 months, I was just a loan officer. And I had to go, I needed to go bring in the business for myself. And I had to learn everything the hard way. So what I would say is I think the most valuable thing that you could do to speed up your learning time would be to work under a large team. Go get a job with a large team. And again, I think that the other thing that a lot of people do when they start getting the taste of making money, because I mean, let's be real, I think a lot of people get into real estate because of the commissions, right? Like you can make really good income relatively quickly or not, some people it takes like 6 months before they close their first deal and other people close in the first few months and it's great. But it's that sort of like you don't have that ceiling of income. But the problem is when you make that money, you spend it really fast because you're like, holy moly, this is amazing. And you go and you buy things. I was guilty of it too. I bought the car. I bought the condo. I was the girl buying the table at the club when I was 21. I was doing all of those things. So that's why I really harp on the fact of like staying home, saving your money, investing sooner, just because that does lay your foundation. I will say, for example, the first recession that I ever went through was really like 2008 or 9, that whole like the great financial crisis. That was scary. I had savings. It wasn't horrible for me, thankfully. But it came down to me having a decent amount of money to get me through, like savings, to get through that. But I didn't really have any assets. I sold my condo at a loss. So now, this second round wave comes through, like where real estate, I mean, apparently nobody wants to admit that we've been in a recession, but I think, technically we have had recessions and the real estate market is tough, but we have assets this time, cash flowing assets. So now this cycle is even less difficult. So my point is that you can survive a cycle when you have cash flowing assets. It makes it that much easier. So the sooner you can jump on that train, work under a big team, learn, invest as soon as possible, that lays a really good foundation for your future. And that's what I would do. Easier said than done, I get it, but that's what I would do.
Right. I've thought about that too. Investing locally or out of state in an area that's foreign to you make more sense?
For me, it's always local. In your backyard that you know, which is hard because look, you can go buy properties in Indiana or Michigan for a lot cheaper than you can here in San Diego.
True.
But for me, what I've found is, I've seen a lot of clients go through this cycle too, is that they went and they bought in New Mexico, Arizona, Kansas, Oklahoma, like these different places. But when the market isn't good, the vacancy goes up there. Your property manager starts like drowning and not doing as well. And now you're flying to Kansas or New Mexico or wherever to take over your investment. You're having to put capital injections into the property to keep it running. It's really stressful. So I just say that you don't know any other market better than your own backyard, with a close second being where you lived before or you have family. I have not done that, but I do think that if you have family that can help you out and stuff, that could make sense. But I've done research looking, investing elsewhere. I've invested passively in other states like Texas and Florida and stuff. And nothing beats San Diego. Nothing beats where you live.
Right.
You know, and you know the market. Like, for example, I know I've had a couple clients who live in these like strange places, like Grass Valley or Hemet, like these really tiny towns where I personally would never invest. But if you're like the king of Hemet and you know this place like the back of your hand, you know where the opportunities are. You can make that investment knowing like, okay, cool, I can just do this, or I can maybe pivot to that. So I just think you have a lot more power and knowledge where you live than anywhere else.
True. Yeah, I've been in that dilemma, and especially maybe someone my age looking to invest in real estate has looked at maybe somewhere cheaper, let's just say Tennessee, because it's like $70,000, $80,000 homes over there. But is that the smart decision to go with?
So just as an example, like some of my clients have had where like, you know, they buy where it snows and now you didn't know that you had expenses for snow plowing and this kind of stuff. Tennessee, there's no Prop 13, so they can just jack your property taxes. I had a client who was in a syndicated a deal in Tennessee. Their property tax bill went up $100,000 a year after they bought the property. Dang. I don't even know what's going on with that property now, but there was no way that they were going to increase the income enough to cover that. Wow. And so that is the thing. Like in Florida, they have these weird like engineering inspections now, like every so often, where if your building is older, they can require you to like retrofit or make these crazy improvements that could be insanely expensive. These are all things we don't have here in San Diego. I would never know to look for those things unless someone told me. That's the other reason, is I feel like I have kind of blinders on when it comes to different markets, and you're really relying on third parties who are not as invested as you, because it's not their money, to tell you what sort of things to expect. And it's like that one thing that they forget to tell you about that ends up screwing you in the end. Oh, man. So that's why I would be very careful. Like if you have a friend who's had a ton of experience and they can walk you through it, maybe it's different. But it's your hard-earned cash at the end of the day. That's true. Right. Yeah. And so it's like, I know you want to get in and I know you want to buy it cheaper, but I also have learned the 10 cap areas, there's also like caveats to that. You know, vacancy's higher, these expenses, these unknown expenses come up. Like there's reasons why it's a 10 cap, because it's not really a 10 cap, you know? I see. Nice. That's what I found. Yeah, that's good to know. That's good to know. Well, Krystle, it's been great having you on the show. I appreciate all the stuff that we've talked about. And to everyone watching, thank you guys for watching. I'm Tristan, your host. This is Krystle, our special guest today. And where could people find you? So my website is pacificshorecapital.com, or you can find me on Instagram. It's Krystle Rose Simpson. Great. Yeah. Awesome. We'll see you guys on the next episode.